It's about that time. It's time when people start planning out their winter project build. So I thought I would make a video covering 3 things that are very important to consider if you're building out a budget bike as a winter project bike. Because as we most often do here on this channel, we take big box bikes like this one from Walmart. This was a Mongoose Ledge X1, and then we add parts to them and make them very, very capable, very fun to ride. This is my most expensive build to date, over $3,000 in this bike. And you might look at some of these components and go, well, wait a minute, I don't see anything that would cost $3,000. Well, let me point you to the wheels. Those are carbon, and this carbon wheel set cost me $1,200. I built this at a time when you couldn't get parts. Not only that, but this had to be adapted. This is 135 rear space, and we'll talk about this in just a moment. But trust me, I spent $1,200 on this, over $3,000 all total. Of all my build bikes so far, I think it's the most capable. A lot of fun. I thought I would create this video and cover 3 things that you need to consider when you start planning out a project bike. Let's jump right in with number 1, and that is cost versus gain. So you have the bike, whatever you spent on it, you have to start adding up those parts. And trust me, it adds up quick. Like as mentioned with this carbon wheel set. Bontrager Line Pro 30. Now there's like a Line Comp and a Line Elite. This is the Line Pro, I think their most expensive one. And this was a wheel set that had to be adapted because this bike has 135 rear spacing. When you start shopping for carbon wheels that have a wide diameter, you can mount wider tires to, and it's not 148 or even 142, you start running into problems. And these wheels are actually 2 wheels, and that's why the cost was so high. I had to buy aluminum Bontrager Line 30s, and what they had to do was I bought these wheels, and then they had to lace out the spokes in the hub and lace them onto these carbon rims, and that's how this wheel set was born. And all of that, well, that gets expensive. Even if I were to have just bought these wheels outright, carbon wheels, I mean, they sound cool and I like the lightweight, they ride really well, but really overall, the performance gain that you're gonna get in any way with carbon isn't gonna offset the cost, at least when it comes to modifying a budget bike, like a Mongoose, a Schwinn, an Ozark Trail, a Kent Travell, anything like that, a Giordano, any of the bikes that you've seen on this channel. I just don't think it's worth it, really. It was fun to do this, but I doubt I will do it again. Actually, I think I did do it one more time, but not anymore because of cost, unless I just luck into a wheel set that's free or super cheap. But this is kind of a good segue into number 2, performance versus cost. And I know that sounds very similar, but stick with me here. So let's talk about, say, these pedals. I spent, I think at the time, about $65, maybe even $69 for these fun black magic pedals. They're very nice. I like the orange. It kind of goes with the whole theme. If I get this little valve stem cap over here, look at that. Look how well that matches. It was planned out that way. But the reality of the situation is that the performance that these pedals give is no different than the Fuker pedals that I can buy for 18 to 20 bucks at almost any given time. I would even argue that the plant footing surface here, these pegs, is probably a little better on a Fuker. Now I like this little recess here, but overall, 20 bucks versus, like I said, 60 something in that range. Today, I looked these up just a little earlier, they're still 56 bucks for these pedals. That means these are not really good performance versus cost in relation to another product, a budget product like the Fuker. And I can look over this bike and I can spot multiple things. And by the way, if you spot that and go, that looks like a new cassette, it is because I borrowed the one. I stole it. I took the one off of this, I put it on a different bike, and I had to replace it. But as long as I replace it and keep the bikes rolling, it's all good. And this bike has been rolling, and you're going to see it soon out on the new jump line at Wildwood because it's very, very capable, does a great job. I want to show that off. As I mentioned, my most expensive build, I like to put it to use and keep it right and keep it going because it's such a good bike. But if I had it to do over again, I would probably go more with some of my tried and true. I mean, I did here with these crank sets. Some people like Shimano crank sets. They're great. But the IXF, the cost that these cost, that's been consistent. Even with all the pricing going up and the fluctuations we've had over the years, these have stayed pretty consistent. And the performance, in my opinion, is excellent. So why would I choose anything but this or a variation of this when they work so well versus the more expensive name brand option? And these carbon wheels, if you didn't pick up on it, I just wouldn't do this again. With the carbon wheels, at least not on this bike, I would just go with the aluminum and add another, I don't know, 8 ounces, something like that. It's not enough weight to justify the cost that these are because, as I said, there's just not enough performance for this build to justify carbon wheels of this caliber. Okay, so we've had cost versus gain and performance versus cost. They kind of blur together a little bit, but they're very applicable no matter which direction you approach it from. The third thing, and the super important part, the main part of this video, I want to talk about staying within spec limits. Back here, the spacing is 135. That is set in stone. There's nothing that can be done to adapt this to, like, say, 148, aside from being a really good welder and just going outside the norm or outside of the average person's abilities to expand this. So that's locked in. You just work with what you got there. And this bottom bracket, I mean, that's locked in with its width. You can go external bearing, bottom bracket, whatever you want to do, but those two things are locked in. But if we move up this with the head tube angle kind of set in stone, you can offset it with some adapters. You can offset it with a larger fork like the one that I've got on this. This is 140 millimeters of travel. But this is very, very much something that I want to point out, something you need to take heed of. If you have a bike and it comes like this one did with a 100 millimeter fork, in general, now this isn't set in stone, but pretty much it's kind of an agreed upon non-written standard, and I think some brands actually write it in. But typically, if a bike comes with a 100 millimeter fork, you can go up as much as 20 millimeters in fork travel before you start creating excessive stress up here. Wait a minute, didn't you just say you went to 140 millimeters? Yes, I did. And that is a risk that I take, and that's also why you might notice there is dirt there, but there's not dirt right on this little weld all the way around. If I went to the other side, it's clean all the way around, because post-ride and pre-ride, every single time, at least if I've done any jumping at all on this, I check this. I check it diligently, and I look over those welds and make sure that there are no problems, because I am overstressing this. That extra 20 millimeters, what it does is actually kind of kicks this out. It brings up the front end, so it changes the effective head tube angle, makes it even slacker, and that puts stress. All on here, even stress. Up to here, keep that clean. You might notice the top is clean. I start working my way down here. I've got to finish the rest of the cleaning before the next video on this bike. But I wanted to point out this is always clean down here because I check it so often, and I see so many people upgrading these bikes and talking about 160, 180. The Ozark Trail FS2 Slalom, I've seen people do those. That's really pushing it. So stress, 20 millimeter is a set thing that I think, unless you know what you're doing, you should really be careful with and not exceed. Even though I did, I know it's a risk and it's one I take, but I know what to look for. I also know the sounds that I would hear, the feelings I would experience should there be a problem. The average person does not. So my recommendation would be to stay within that 20 millimeter range. Now, technically, I think that 20 millimeters goes down as well. So 100 millimeters, I could go down to 80 or up to 120, but I doubt there is a single budget bike upgrader alive that would go from 100 on a mountain bike down to 80, at least willingly, and be happy with it. I mean, you can do what you want to do, but take it, it's at your own risk. And if you do modify like I did, be sure you check it. Check it often, or check with the manufacturer, because I know certain Trek bikes, they're actually one of the ones that I've seen that put that 20 millimeter spec out there on a couple of frames. I'm pretty sure it was them. But Mongoose, I doubt very seriously they would tell you to go above 120 on this frame or any frame that comes with a 100. Or even if it was a 120, 140 would be fine, but going up to a 160, pushing it. So be aware of the unofficial spec range. It might be official on some. There is more than just this though. Let's go back to these crank arms. Let me turn them around here. That nice hub engagement clicking. Just made a post about that. A lot of people do like it, some don't. But look here, and this says 170. This bike came with 170 millimeter cranks, but you could go up to 175. I mean, they make crank sizes, well, in many, many sizes. 175, 170, 165, and so on. I think the shorter ones are kind of the in thing now, but some people try to go up to 175. They want a longer crank arm. That works on many 29ers, but this bike has 27.5 wheels. If you put 175 millimeter cranks on this, I know it's just 5 millimeters, but that is enough to create a pedal strike situation, which can happen a lot easier and a lot more often. We lower this down, there's just not some clearance here. I mean, look at that. Where that is in relation to the ground, not very far. And if you take just a little bit off of that, you can create a pedal strike situation, or too easy to pedal strike, and that can be dangerous. This video has had quite a few tips in it, and I want to add one more, and that is tire clearance. Now, there's no spec on this that I'm aware of from any manufacturer as far as any stated range of millimeters or inches, but my general rule is if I can't fit my finger in there, it's tight, it's pinching down on it here, but I can easily move my finger in and out. And if I can't do that, there and there on both sides, and also on the fork, but I do it sideways. See that? Poke in sideways. If I can't fit there, and make sure right up here that it doesn't balloon up on this top, that is bad, 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 especially up front. If your front tire locks up because anything gets wedged in here, you're going over the bars. That's a bad day. So make sure your spacing with your tires works with the frame, because a lot of people like to go wider tires. I hear it that's probably one of the top questions I get asked anytime a new bike comes out. How wide of tires will fit on this? Well, safely wide would be my answer. Start sticking your fingers in there. I mean, I can usually tell you when I start upgrading them, but if you have a bike and you're planning on upgrading it, make sure there's clearance, because sticks, how many times have you had a stick start rubbing in here, get caught in up at the fork as well? So be careful, make sure that those work well. And while we're here and on a full suspension bike, I don't recommend going outside of the stock range, because it starts changing the geometry, the rear geometry, and that can pitch you forward. It can pitch it down and start having other clearance issues. It can do all kinds of things. So if you don't know what you're doing, stay safe and just be careful, because there's not always a guide out there that's going to tell you things. So mainly 20 millimeters here, clearance, front and rear, and even down at the cranks. Make sure you don't go super long and don't develop a pedal strike situation. But what do you think? Comment below. Did this video help you out? Did you already know this stuff? Are you working on a project build? What are you working on for this winter? Or are you already riding your project dream bike? And if so, what'd you come up with? Let me have it. And hey, do you ride a ledge? These, you just don't see them much anymore, but this is my favorite project build. Not because it was my most expensive, just because, wow, it ended up so good. But that's today's video. Comment below with anything you have to say, especially if this helped you out. Let me know. Stay tuned to see this out at the new jump line. Have a great day.